Have you ever walked down a hospital hallway at night and felt like something was walking behind you? A patient flatlines, and a full minute later, you hear them scream. A locked room opens on its own, revealing someone who looks exactly like you. Some stories from night shifts can't be explained with medicine or logic. They linger, they whisper, they wait. These are 8 terrifying hospital horror stories that'll make you question every shadow, every flicker, every sound in the dark. This is High Scary Stories. Let's begin. Story 1. The scream that wasn't his. Nights in the ER are never quiet, not truly. There's always something: the beeping of monitors, the low shuffle of rubber soles, the hum of fluorescent lights that buzz like they're straining to stay alive. But that night was different. It was too still, like the hospital itself was holding its breath. The kind of quiet that doesn't calm you, it coils around your spine. I'd worked night shifts for over 15 years, and even on the slowest evenings, there was always a rhythm to the chaos. But this wasn't slow. It was waiting. The monitors weren't beeping. The phones weren't ringing. The usual shuffle of patients and nurses faded into a low, static hush. Outside, rain tapped the windows like fingers trying to get in. I remember glancing at the clock, 10:42 p.m., and thinking, this calm isn't natural. I didn't know it yet, but the storm that was coming wasn't in the sky. It was already on its way in. Then the radio crackled. Trauma inbound. Male late 30s. Motorcycle collision. No helmet. Vitals unstable. ETA 3 minutes. I didn't even have to look at the others. We moved in sync. Trauma room 3 was cleared out in under 60 seconds. Gloves snapped on. Crash cart rolled in. Fluids prepped. The kind of coordination that only comes from doing this 1,000 times. But even with the familiarity, something in the air felt wrong. The ambulance came in hot. The paramedics looked off. Not panicked, these guys don't panic, but tense in a way that makes your skin crawl. Like they'd already decided the outcome, but were going through the motions anyway. The doors burst open, and they wheeled him in fast, body-limp blood, soaking through what was left of his clothes. "Name's Tyler Green," one of them said, breathless. "Found ID in his wallet. Road rash, blunt force trauma to the chest, probable internal bleeding." He coded once on the ride. The gurney skidded as we transferred him. That sound metal on linoleum cut through the stillness like a scream. Time did something strange then. It slowed. Or maybe my brain did. Everything else became background noise: the voices of the team, the barked orders, the beep of the vitals monitor, trying to pretend there was still something left to monitor. His chest was sunken in, bone and blood and dirt layered like someone had tried to fold him in half. I took one look and knew he wasn't going to make it. But we worked him anyway. We always do. Because sometimes you get a miracle. Sometimes they come back. But not this one. This one came carrying something else entirely. We worked him for 13 minutes. Chest compressions, epinephrine fluids, intubation. Dr. Halverson barked orders like a general in a losing battle, and we followed everyone. No one said what we were all thinking, that we were just delaying the inevitable. His heart wouldn't hold a rhythm, his pupils were blown, and his oxygen levels never bounced back. At 11:05 p.m., the flat line held. "Time of death, 23:05, Dr. Halverson said quietly. Everyone stepped back in that familiar, haunted way. Gloves snapped off. Silence fell like a sheet. I stayed behind, as I usually did, to zip the body bag. It's not protocol, it's habit. A stupid ritual I've developed after years of losing more people than I can count. There's something about being the last one to touch them, to acknowledge them, that feels like dignity. I leaned over to zip him up. His face was slack jaw, half open, the skin around his eyes already paling. I pulled the bag halfway and reached to tuck the sheet under his chin. And then he screamed. Not a groan, not post-mortem air, not the soft hiss that sometimes escapes when lungs decompress. This was a scream, deep, violent, guttural. The kind of sound that rips out of someone being burned alive. It came from his mouth. I saw it. I froze. So did everyone else. Holly, the new nurse, dropped her chart. One of the techs turned and ran. I swear on everything I've ever loved, Tyler Green, whose vitals were flat, whose heart had not beat in over 6 minutes, screamed. And for just one breathless second, it felt like something else had screamed through him. Something that had finally found a voice. Security pulled the hallway footage after Holly filed an incident report. No one wanted to say what we'd all heard, not in plain terms, but it was enough to trigger protocol. A clinical anomaly, they called it. That's what we do when something doesn't make sense, file it under words that mean nothing, and hope the paperwork can smother the unease. The camera was positioned just outside Trauma Room 3, angled through the narrow window on the door. No audio, just grainy black and white footage. We watched it together in the back office, me, Dr. Halvorsen, Holly, and 2 admin reps with faces like stone. At 11:05, we saw ourselves step back. Dr. Halvorsen called the time. Me leaning over the gurney, reaching for the bag. And then it happened. My shoulders flinched. Holly jumped. One of the techs in the hall turned exactly as we remembered. But Tyler never moved. His mouth never opened. His chest never rose. The footage showed a corpse, motionless mouth, slightly parted eyes shut. But all of us heard it, not just in the room. The scream was loud enough to register on the hallway intercom mics, muffled but distinct. Forensic audio pulled it, ran it through filters. They confirmed it came from inside Trauma Room 3. No one entered. No one left. His jaw was sealed. That sound did not come from him. Or maybe it did, but not his. The hospital hushed the incident as they always do. Too many questions, no clean answers. But I couldn't let it go. Something about the scream clung to me, not just the sound of it, but the emotion baked into it. Pain, terror, desperation. But not from someone dying. From someone who wasn't allowed to die right away. A week later, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled Tyler Green's file. 37 years old, freelance mechanic, lived alone. No known mental health history, no prior medical records in our system. But one line in the file stood out: former volunteer firefighter, resigned 2017. So I searched obituaries, archive news, anything I could find. And then I found it. July 2015. A house fire, 3 teenagers trapped. One pulled out alive barely. The other 2 didn't make it. The youngest, a boy named Micah Reyes, died screaming as the flames overtook the 2nd floor. Tyler Green had been on scene. He was the one who pulled the surviving boy out. He'd stepped away to get help, thinking he could go back for Micah, but by the time he turned around, the stairwell had collapsed. Witnesses said the screams could be heard from the street. Tyler had 4 ER visits in the years that followed: chest pain, insomnia, 1 panic attack during a fire drill at work. He'd never gone back to emergency service. And now, 10 years later, he dies in a trauma room. And that same scream tears through the walls again. Not his, Micah's. Like something Tyler had carried in his bones had finally clawed its way out. I haven't talked about it since. Not officially. Not in any report. Not even with Holly, who won't go near Trauma Room 3 anymore. But sometimes, when I'm pulling a night shift and things go too quiet, I remember the way that scream sounded, not just loud, but ancient. like it had waited years to be heard, like it had sat buried in Tyler's chest, pressed between ribs and regret, biding its time until the body couldn't contain it anymore. It wasn't supernatural, at least not in the way people think. It didn't flicker lights or slam doors. It didn't whisper in vents or leave footprints behind. It wasn't a ghost. It was pain, raw and unresolved. The kind of pain that doesn't fade when the heart stops. The kind that rides along in silence, waiting for a body too broken to hold it. Some things don't die. They wait. They wait to be screamed. Story 2. The Heart That Dreamed. The call came in just after 9:30 p.m. A code stroke male 25 found unresponsive by his roommate. By the time EMS got to him, his pupils were fixed and dilated GCS scores of 3 no corneal reflex. He was breathing barely, but no one said it out loud, and this wasn't going to be a recovery. His name was Owen Laird. No significant medical history. No drugs or alcohol in his system. One minute he was watching a movie in his apartment. The next, he was on the floor unconscious with no pulse for almost 3 minutes before CPR was initiated. The CT scan confirmed the worst massive cerebral edema herniation already in progress. We ran the full battery of brain death tests. Apnea test, cold calorics, doll's eyes, flat EEG. Everything came back conclusive. He was gone even if the machine kept his chest rising and falling. His mother, Joanna, arrived around midnight. She didn't cry, just stood there staring at the monitors like they owed her an explanation. When we brought up organ donation, she said yes before we even finished the sentence. He'd want to help, she whispered, hand resting over his chest. He always had a big heart. None of us realized how literally she meant it. The heart was matched to a recipient within 12 hours, a 38-year-old man named Caleb Monroe, father of 2 who'd been waiting on the transplant list for over a year due to dilated cardiomyopathy. His condition had taken a sharp turn the week before. By the time Owen's heart became available, Caleb had less than a week left. The surgery went smoothly. Textbook. Dr. Kapoor led the transplant team with his usual steady hands. They opened Caleb's chest, removed the failing heart, and placed Owen's in. Within seconds, it responded, beat, strong, rhythmic, eager. The surgical suite filled with a low hum of cautious optimism. By the next morning, Caleb was awake, groggy but alert. His vitals were strong. The heart was functioning even better than expected. By day 3, he was sitting up in bed, cracking jokes with his nurses. "You've got a good engine now," one of the interns said, smiling. Caleb patted his chest, surprised by how calm it all felt. "Feels like it's always been mine," he replied. It was the kind of case you tell med students about. Perfect donor match, flawless timing, smooth recovery. No one noticed in those first few days how often Caleb's dreams made him stir at night. How he'd wake up whispering names he didn't recognize. Or how every time he placed his hand over his new heart, he looked just a little too uncertain, as if it were listening. It started with the dreams. Caleb mentioned them casually at first, in that half-joking post-op haze most patients float in. Weird stuff, he'd say with a shrug. Feels like deja vu, but stretched. By the end of his first week in recovery, they'd taken a darker turn. He began waking up at exactly 2 to 47 a.m., heart racing, drenched in sweat. When asked what he remembered, he'd pause, then say, "I was running." Running where I don't know, he'd whisper. But I wasn't running from something. I was running toward it. Toward someone screaming. The dreams became more vivid. He described places he'd never been, an apartment with blue curtains, a kitchen with a chipped white tile floor, and the feeling of socks slipping on wood panels. He knew the names Matt and Jordan, but didn't know who they were. Said he could hear a laugh in the distance, a laugh he swore was familiar, but couldn't place. One night, he woke up with tears running down his face. He looked straight at the night nurse and said, "I didn't mean to leave." She asked what he meant, but he just shook his head, confused. "I don't even know who I'm talking about." Caleb's wife, Marissa, grew concerned. "He's different," she told us. His voice sometimes sounds younger. He pauses before answering, like he's hearing something else first. "And he's been asking me if I know where his bike is. He hasn't owned a bike since high school." It was subtle but persistent, like something inside him was trying to remember. And Caleb was the one stuck listening. 2 weeks after the transplant, Caleb attended a donor family event hosted by the hospital, a quiet, respectful gathering meant to offer closure to grieving families and gratitude from recipients. Most people stayed near the coffee station, speaking in soft voices, avoiding eye contact too long. But Caleb felt drawn to one woman, standing alone by the window, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Joanna Laird, Owen's mother. She hadn't planned to speak to anyone. She only came because she thought maybe, just maybe, seeing the man her son saved would give the silence some meaning. When Caleb approached her, he didn't know who she was, not at first, but something in him pulled forward before his mind caught up. He offered a soft hi, and she turned, eyes widening. Her hand went to her chest just over her heart. "I know you," she whispered. Caleb blinked. "Have we met?" Joanna shook her head slowly, studying his face, his posture, the subtle way he shifted his weight like Owen used to when nervous. Then Caleb said it, without knowing why. "Matt says hi." Joanna's breath caught. Matt was Owen's childhood best friend. He died in high school. Caleb didn't know that, but Owen did. Joanna asked to meet Caleb again the following week, not out of obligation, something deeper. She needed to know if what she felt that day wasn't just grief messing with her mind. Caleb agreed. They sat in a quiet family lounge outside the transplant unit, surrounded by faded pamphlets and muted wallpaper. "I've been having dreams," he said quietly, eyes not meeting hers. "Not mine. Not memories I recognize." Joanna said nothing, waiting. "I see a couch with ripped seams, a white dog with one blue eye, a green bike leaning against a chipped mailbox. I hear someone laughing, and I know it's my brother, even though I've never had one." He looked up. "I've started saying things I don't understand, calling people names I've never used before. I even recognized your face before I knew who you were." Joanna's hands trembled. "Those are Owen's memories. The dog Luna. The bike was his first. The couch, we threw it out 5 years ago." Caleb pressed his hand against his chest, fingers splayed over the sternum. "I don't think your son left." They sat in silence, two people sharing one echo. Later that night, Caleb dreamed again, but this time it wasn't fragments. It was sharp. He was sitting on a couch, phone in hand, texting someone named Jordan. Music played softly from the kitchen. He looked up and saw his own reflection, except it wasn't his face. It was Owen's. He startled awake, heart pounding, not with fear but with longing. It wasn't just memories bleeding through. It was presence, a cohabitation. Owen wasn't gone. He was riding along, tucked inside the rhythm of each beat, looking out through Caleb's eyes, waiting for something. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe closure. Maybe just a chance to finish the sentence death had cut short. It's been nearly a year now. Caleb is healthy, stronger than he's ever been. The transplant team calls it a textbook success. But he doesn't dream like he used to, not of his childhood, his family, or even his own memories. The dreams now come from someone else's life, like a film he's watched too many times but never starred in. Sometimes he wakes up humming a tune he's never heard. Sometimes he starts writing numbers down, only to realize it's Owen's old locker combination, something no one ever told him. Joanna visits once a month. She brings coffee and photos, and sometimes just sits beside him listening. She says it feels like her son is still here, not as a ghost, not haunting, but alive in pieces. Caleb doesn't question it anymore. He stopped trying to figure out where Owen ends and he begins. Because deep down, he knows the truth. The brain dies. The thoughts go. The logic fades. But the heart remembers. And sometimes it keeps dreaming long after the body has stopped. Story 3. The Clara Duplicate. It was one of those chaotic Friday nights where the ER feels like it's spinning faster than you can move. Flu season was overlapping with prom night injuries, and weekend drunk drivers, a perfect storm of noise, blood, and unanswered questions. I was halfway through hanging a second bag of fluids for a trauma patient when triage called over the radio. MVC incoming. Female, early 30s. Ejected on impact. Estimated arrival 7 minutes. We scrambled to prep trauma room 5. When the ambulance arrived, they wheeled in a woman barely clinging to consciousness, face swollen hair, matted with blood, breathing shallow. The paramedic handed me her ID. Clara Reynolds, 35. No next of kin listed. Vitals were tanking. Pelvis shattered. BP dropping fast. We pushed fluids and prepped for emergency surgery. Then just as we stabilized her for transfer, triage buzzed again. Another trauma. Female driver. Solo accident. Unconscious at scene. ETA 3 minutes. I blinked. That's rare, but not unheard of. They rolled her in right on time. Dark skin, curly hair, same age bracket. The paramedic clipped a chart to the bed. Name's Clara Simmons. Born March 14th, 1989. I froze. Same first name, same birthday. I glanced at the vital screen, then back to the first Clara still being wheeled into surgery. My stomach twisted. The odds of it being a coincidence were astronomical. Both women admitted within 20 minutes of each other. Both in life-threatening condition. Both named Clara, and both born on the exact same day. No one said it out loud, but I saw it in the glances exchanged between staff. Something about it didn't feel random. It felt designed. By the time both Claras were stabilized in separate wings of the ICU, things had already gotten weird. First, the attending nurse on Clara Reynolds and the one from the first crash noticed the necklace around her neck, a thin silver chain with a small oval locket. Nothing unusual, except when Clara Simmons was prepped for imaging, she had the exact same one. Same chain length, same oval shape, even the same tiny scratch on the clasp. That's impossible, the nurse muttered. She wasn't exaggerating. We checked personal belongings, confirmed the items came with each patient. No duplication in processing. Then came the scar. I was changing a dressing on Clara Simmons's shoulder when I saw it faint curved just beneath the collarbone. A crescent scar, maybe from a childhood surgery or accident. I paused, stunned. Because 2 hours earlier, I'd helped Dr. Murthy suture over the same scar on Clara Reynolds. Same shape, same location. Still, we might have chalked it up to pure chance, until Clara Simmons, still groggy and on a low dose of sedative, whispered something under her breath as I adjusted her oxygen mask. I was in the woods. The fire was behind me. She was murmuring a dream, but it wasn't hers. It was mine. word for word, detail for detail, the nightmare I'd had the night before. Something I hadn't told anyone. I stepped back, heart pounding. And in that moment, I knew whatever this was, it wasn't medical. It was something else. Something mirroring. Clara Reynolds didn't make it through the night. Despite the surgical team's best efforts, her injuries were too severe. Her heart gave out at 3:12 a.m. quietly, without drama. Just a long, flat line, and then silence. We cleaned her up gently, covered her with a sheet, logged her personal items, the silver necklace, a single hair tie, a scuffed pair of boots. Across the ICU, Clara Simmons began to seize. No warning, just sudden violent tremors that knocked her vitals into chaos. Alarms shrieked. Nurses swarmed. But it wasn't a medical seizure. Her body shook, but there was no neurological misfire. Her brain activity was still eerily calm on the EEG. And then she stopped, eyes wide open, breathing slow, pulse normal. She looked straight at me, though I knew she couldn't possibly recognize my face. "She's gone, isn't she?" she asked, voice paper thin. I swallowed. "Who?" She blinked slowly, like waking from a long dream. "The other Clara," she whispered. I felt her leave. I tried to steady my voice. "What do you mean, she's been with me?" "Since before the crash. Watching. Hovering. I didn't know what to call it, but I could feel her. Her heartbeat was next to mine." She paused, tears welling up. "She's still waiting, you know." For what I asked, barely above a whisper. Clara Simmons turned her face to the ceiling and exhaled like someone releasing a lifetime of weight. To finish what we started. And just like that, I wasn't sure who I was speaking to anymore. After that night, I couldn't let it go. I requested access to both patients' files under the guise of continuity of care. I cross-referenced birth certificates, home addresses, emergency contacts, insurance records, even blood types. Nothing matched. Clara Reynolds was born in Ohio. Clara Simmons in upstate New York, in different hospitals, different parents, different childhoods. No shared schools, no overlapping addresses, no known relatives. I even checked adoption records and closed-circuit foster systems. Still nothing. Their medical histories were similarly divergent. Reynolds had a tonsillectomy at age 10. Simmons never had surgery. Reynolds had a mild nut allergy. Simmons could eat almonds by the handful. But then the oddities began to pile up. Both wore the same prescription lenses. Both had broken their left wrist at age 11. Both had a childhood dog named Toby. Coincidence, maybe. But how many coincidences add up before it becomes something else? The hospital administrator I spoke to called it an anomaly. Told me to let it go. But I couldn't. Because the night Clara Reynolds died, Clara Simmons started humming a tune no one had ever taught her. The same lullaby Clara Reynolds' mother said she used to sing every night before bed. Weeks passed. Clara Simmons recovered faster than anyone expected, physically at least. But her behavior shifted. She became quieter, more introspective. She'd pause mid-sentence like someone else was finishing the thought inside her head. She started referring to herself in the plural. "We don't like that kind of music," she said once when a nurse turned on the radio. When I asked who we meant, she stared at me for a long time before saying, "You wouldn't believe me." But I already did. On her last night in the ICU, she asked me to sit with her. She said she wanted to tell me something before discharge. It wasn't a coincidence, she began. We were one. I stayed silent, letting her speak. I don't know how or why, but we were the same soul split. Maybe a choice, maybe a mistake, but I always felt like something was missing, until I felt her dying. And then everything clicked into place. Her memories came flooding in, like a door finally unlocked. She looked down at her hands. I think she was stronger. That's why she went first. And I think I was the watcher. The one who had to remember. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She's not gone. She's with me now. Fully. We're whole. I didn't respond. Because I knew then I wasn't treating a survivor. I was witnessing a reunion. Clara Simmons was discharged the next morning. She walked out under her own power, but it felt like watching someone older deeper, like she carried more years than her chart could explain. She didn't look back, just paused at the automatic doors, whispered something I couldn't hear, and vanished into the sunlight. Her records remain archived, 2 separate lives, 2 unique patients. But I still keep their files side by side like a puzzle with matching edges. Sometimes I wonder if the universe corrects itself in strange, invisible ways. Sometimes I wonder if souls can fracture and find their way back. What I witnessed wasn't coincidence. It was something older, something inevitable. 2 bodies, 1 fate. Story 4. Room 4. The Gatekeeper. The first thing you should know about Marcus is that he doesn't scare easy. 20 years as a night nurse in a mid-sized hospital will do that to you. He's seen it all: trauma, overdose, cardiac arrests, psych breaks, even the occasional code black that turns your stomach. He moves through chaos with the quiet confidence of someone who stopped asking why a long time ago. So when the ER admitted an unidentified patient male, mid-40s, no ID, unconscious, and ice cold to the touch, despite a normal core temperature, Marcus didn't flinch. The man had been found wandering the edge of a construction site just off Route 9, collapsed without a word. No signs of injury, no track marks, no head trauma. Just silence. The attending physician ordered basic labs, tox, screen, CT, all clean. No trauma, no drugs, no reason for him to be catatonic. The man didn't even blink, but his vitals were steady and his breathing was smooth, almost too smooth. Mechanical, like he wasn't asleep, like he was waiting. They admitted him under the name John Doe, and because the ICU was full, he was temporarily placed in room 4. Marcus had passed that room 1,000 times, never gave it a second thought. But the moment the man was wheeled in, something shifted. The air changed. The hallway outside felt heavier. Marcus didn't say anything at the time. But later he'd tell me he knew that man wasn't just a patient. He was a threshold. And room 4 had just become something else entirely. It was supposed to be a standard night shift chart, updates, quiet rounds, the occasional beeping IV. Marcus checked in on room 4 just after 2:00 a.m. The patient hadn't moved, eyes closed, no muscle twitch, no vocalization, same steady vitals. Marcus noted it all in the chart and turned to leave. Then the man whispered his name. Not loud, not sudden, just a breath soft and razor sharp. Marcus, he froze. No one had spoken the name aloud in that room. No ID band, no introduction. The man had been unresponsive for nearly 10 hours. Marcus turned slowly, expecting to see open eyes. But the patient remained still, face relaxed, lids shut. Who told you my name? Marcus asked, voice steady, but low. No reply. He stepped closer, checked the monitors. Still stable. No signs of arousal. He was about to step back when the man whispered again. She's almost here. Marcus felt the hair on his arms rise. Who? No response. Just the faintest twitch at the corner of the man's mouth. Almost a smile. That's when the machines began glitching. Brief surges of static across the screen. No loss of vitals, just flickers. And the lights in the hallway dimmed for half a second before returning to normal. Later, when Marcus reviewed the security footage, the timestamp would reveal something even stranger. The moment the man said, "She's almost here," the cameras outside room 4 distorted, blurred, just for 3 seconds, like something was passing by, something the lens couldn't quite hold. But Marcus wasn't thinking about footage then. He was thinking about the woman he hadn't spoken to in years, the one he'd lost, the one no one in the hospital could have known about. By morning, Marcus couldn't shake it. He'd barely slept during the break, mind replaying that whisper over and over. "She's almost here." It wasn't just the words, it was the way the men said them. Like a fact, not a prediction. Like he knew. So Marcus did what he wasn't supposed to. He ran a search. First, through the hospital system, no match. No fingerprint record, no insurance data, no emergency contact. Not even an alias. Next, he called in a favor from an old friend in admin who still owed him for covering a shift during the flu wave of 2019. They ran the patient through regional databases. Still nothing. No missing person report. No DMV record. No arrest history. The man didn't exist. Marcus stared at the blank screen longer than he should have, because in all his years, he'd never seen a true blank. There's always something, a digital footprint, a trace. But this time, nothing. Just a man with no name lying silent in room 4. Until last night, when he spoke Marcus's name like it was stitched into his bones. And somehow, worse than that, like he'd always known it. Marcus couldn't let it go. The way the John Doe had spoken, the strange distortion on the hallway cameras, the impossible knowledge of his name. It clawed at him like a splinter under the skin. So on his next night off, he dug deeper not into databases, but into the hospital's physical archives. Down in the sub-level storage where old case files gathered dust, Marcus pulled box after box until he found what he didn't even know he was looking for. A patient file dated April 2004. Name, Elizabeth Marin. Admitted after a failed suicide attempt, recovered physically, but exhibited intense dissociative episodes. Kept muttering about the man in room 4 and how he speaks between the minutes. Staff noted her obsession with a door that didn't exist on any hospital floor plan. She'd draw it repeatedly, always dark, always open. Then on her 12th night, Elizabeth vanished. Security footage cut out for a full minute at 3:13 a.m. When it returned, her bed was empty. No alarms were triggered. No forced entry, just gone. Her last recorded statement, noted by a psychiatric intern hours before she disappeared, was scribbled hastily in the margins of her chart. Marcus read it twice. He's waiting for her. Room 4 isn't a room, it's a gate. When she comes, he'll speak again. The nurse with the broken watch will hear his name. Marcus's blood ran cold. He had broken his wrist 10 years earlier. Still wore the same watch every shift. A small crack ran through the faceplate right over the second hand. And the man in room 4 had spoken again. The same phrases, the same cadence. "She's almost here." Marcus sat alone in that basement room, surrounded by dust and forgotten charts, the edges of reality folding in. He thought about the whispers, the way the air seemed to change around room 4. He looked down at the cracked glass on his wrist, and for the first time in 20 years, he wondered if that missing patient, Elizabeth Marin, hadn't vanished at all. Maybe she had simply passed through. The next night, Marcus was assigned a double shift. He didn't protest. He needed to be there. Room 4 had remained quiet. John Doe hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. But the air around it still felt wrong, thick electric, like the moment before a thunderclap. At exactly 3:13 a.m., every monitor on the East Wing blinked once. Just once. a flicker like the building had exhaled, and then the door to room 4 opened. Not wide, just a few inches. Enough to see darkness inside, darker than it should have been. Nurse Lena, doing rounds nearby, turned to close it. She hesitated, hand on the knob. Later, she'd swear the room felt deeper than before, like it stretched. And in that instant, she saw something. A figure in the shadows, same uniform, same badge, same tired eyes. It was her, but not a reflection. This version had no pupils, just endless black, and it smiled. Lena screamed. Marcus ran to her side, yanked the door shut. When they opened it again seconds later, the room was normal. John Doe still lying silent, door locked. But Lena's voice shook as she whispered, "That wasn't a patient. That was me. But I wasn't supposed to be there." They moved John Doe out of room 4 the next morning, transferred him without explanation to a long-term care facility upstate. But Marcus knew it was already too late. Whatever room 4 had been, it had opened. Lena never worked a night shift again. She wouldn't even walk past that hallway. She said the thing that looked like her hadn't blinked, hadn't breathed. It had just waited. Security footage from that night corrupted, just static between 3:12 and 3:15 a.m. No one speaks about room 4 now. It's been reassigned, repainted, renamed. But Marcus still walks past it with his cracked watch and lowered gaze. Because he knows the truth. That man wasn't the mystery. He was never the patient. He was the threshold. Story 5. The Man in the Corner. Every hospital has its stories. Some are jokes passed between night staff to kill the hours. Others are warnings, whispers you hear when the halls get too quiet, when even the machines seem to hold their breath. Ours was about the chair in the East Wing waiting room. The one in the farthest corner under the flickering light. It looked ordinary. Beige vinyl, slightly torn at the seams, but no one sat there. Not anymore. The story went like this: if someone sat in that chair alone between 3 and 4 a.m., they'd see him. Not a ghost, not a hallucination, just a man sitting directly across from them. He never moved, never blinked. His hands rested on his knees, eyes locked onto yours. If you looked away even for a second, he'd be closer when you looked back. First by inches, then feet. And if he ever reached you, you wouldn't leave the hospital. Ever. Some said he was an omen of death. Others thought he was death itself. No one could prove the story, but no one sat in that chair either. Even new hires avoided it without being told. They just knew. And every few months, when someone forgot or dared themselves into bravery, they'd be found hours later, wide-eyed, unable to speak, pointing always to that same corner, where no one ever sat twice. For the longest time, the man in the corner was nothing more than a shadow in conversation, a warning wrapped in folklore. But then the patients started talking, not staff, not long-term psych admits, just regular people stuck in the ER overnight, waiting on tests or family or transfers. It started with a teenage girl who'd been brought in for dehydration. Around 4 to 10 a.m., a nurse found her sobbing uncontrollably in the waiting room. When asked what happened, she simply said he wouldn't stop staring. "Who?" "The man sitting in the corner," she whispered. "The one in the dark jacket." I looked away, and he got closer. They checked the security footage. Nothing. No one in the chair. No one near her. Just the girl staring straight ahead into empty space. A few weeks later, it was a middle-aged man recovering from a minor stroke. He insisted that during the night, a stranger sat down across from him, described the same figure, same expressionless stare. "I blinked," he said. and he was right in front of me. When asked why he didn't call out, he said something that chilled the room. I think he was waiting for me to speak. Then came an elderly woman, lucid and sharp. She refused to sit in the East Wing ever again. He was there last night, she told the nurse. Only this time I recognized him. He looked like my husband did, the night he died. Each account came unprompted. Each described the same eyes, deep still and somehow hungry. And always the same chair. The one in the corner under the flickering light. A month after the last patient report, Nurse Delaney, 10 years on the night shift, practical to a fault, was reorganizing the supply closet near the East Wing. Tucked behind a stack of unused binders and dust-covered training manuals, she found an old envelope marked simply Admin 1987. Inside were faded black and white photos, staff portraits, event snapshots, a few candids. Most were brittle curling at the edges. She flipped through them casually, amused at the outdated uniforms and retro haircuts, until one photo made her freeze. It was a grainy image of the East Wing waiting room. The same corner, same chair. But sitting in it was a woman in scrubs holding a clipboard in mid-laugh. Delaney's breath caught. It was her, not someone who resembled her, not a family look-alike. It was her exact face, same dimples, same scar on the eyebrow she'd gotten in nursing school. But the photo was dated June 1987. Delaney wasn't born until 1991. She stared at it for minutes, the edges trembling in her fingers. And just behind her, in the picture, half faded in shadow, stood a man in a dark jacket, smiling, watching, waiting. Delaney couldn't shake the photo. She brought it home that morning, even though it made her hands sweat just touching it. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. She stared at the image, tracing the edges, trying to find an explanation, Photoshop a prank, a clerical error. But it was real. The age of the paper, the dated uniform, even the faint smell of mildew, it all screamed authenticity. So she did what anyone else would do. She started digging. She searched staff rosters from 1987, combing through microfiche and ancient digital logs in the hospital archives. It took days, but finally she found a name, Clara D. Mercer. Nurse, night shift, assigned to East Wing, and the photo matched. Clara Mercer had disappeared in the spring of '88. No body, no resignation, just gone. Last seen sitting in the waiting room during a slow night shift. Delaney's heart pounded. Because Delaney wasn't her first name. It was her middle name, something she'd used professionally since nursing school. Her full name, Clara Delaney Marshall. Her parents never mentioned why they chose Clara, just said it felt right. She tried to laugh it off. Coincidences happen. But that night she dreamed for the first time in years. She was back in the old East Wing, same flickering light. The man in the corner sat across from her, except this time he looked relieved. "You came back," he said softly. She couldn't speak. "You left me here. But you're ready now, aren't you?" When she woke up, her pillow was wet with tears. Not fear, recognition. She called her mother that morning, her voice shaking. Asked if anyone named Clara had ever been in their family. Her mother went quiet, then confessed something strange. "You were adopted, sweetheart. We were told your birth mother worked in a hospital. Disappeared under mysterious circumstances. No one could ever find her." Delaney sat in silence, the weight of it all crashing down. She wasn't just a nurse. She was the return, a life rerouted, a fate circling back. And now the man in the corner, the one everyone feared, wasn't just watching. He was waiting. For her. For what they'd left unfinished. Delaney returned to the hospital that night. Voluntarily. She didn't clock in. She didn't tell anyone. She walked through the East Wing just past 3 a.m., her steps echoing in the silence. The hallway light flickered just once like it recognized her. She stood in front of the chair in the corner, empty, but the space felt full, saturated with presence. Her breath caught in her throat as she sat down slowly, hands trembling in her lap. And then he appeared. No sudden jump, no flash, just there, across from her. The man, same dark jacket, same eyes, ancient and patient. He didn't smile this time. He simply looked at her, and in that moment she remembered everything. Not just the stories. Her story. The hospital corridors in another lifetime. The laughter with nurses long gone. The long shifts. The rain the night she vanished. And him. A colleague. A friend. The one she left behind when the door opened, when curiosity outweighed caution. She had stepped through. He had stayed. Bound. Delaney's voice broke the silence. I'm sorry. He gave the faintest nod and faded. The chair across from her was empty again. She stood, tears on her cheeks, heartbeat calm. He hadn't been waiting to be seen. He was waiting for her to remember. Story 6. The Nurse Who Stayed. It was Jessica's first night shift. Fresh out of nursing school, still getting used to the starchy uniform and the way the hospital smelled different after dark, like bleach over something older. The senior nurses had welcomed her kindly enough, though with the usual warning, stay alert, trust the monitors, don't nap in the West Wing break room. That last one came with a wink. By 2 a.m., the halls had thinned. Monitors beeped softly, echoing down the empty corridors. Jessica was reviewing charts near room 12 when she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. Someone was standing at the far end of the hallway. Not a patient, not another nurse, just a figure, still, watching. She blinked and looked again, but the hallway was empty. A minute later, she heard the crash metal clanging to the floor inside room 12. She rushed in, heart racing. Nothing was out of place. The IV pole stood where it should. Patient sleeping soundly. But near the foot of the bed, she saw a faint footprint. Bare. Damp. And she was sure of one thing, she hadn't imagined it. Someone else had been there. And they hadn't left through the door. The next night, Jessica returned to room 12 during rounds. The patient, Mr. Alvarez, a soft-spoken man in his 70s recovering from pneumonia, greeted her with a smile. He looked better. Color in his cheeks. Voice stronger. As she checked his vitals, he tilted his head and asked, "Was that other nurse working again tonight?" Jessica paused. "Which nurse?" "The one from last night," he said as if it were obvious. "She sat with me when I couldn't sleep. Kept her hand on mine. Cold hands, but very gentle." Jessica felt a chill crawl up her spine. "No other nurse was assigned here overnight," she replied carefully. He looked surprised. "Well," she said, not to be afraid. "Said I'd be okay by morning." He smiled again, softer this time. And I was. Jessica changed the subject quickly, but her thoughts spun. She hadn't told anyone what she saw. And yet, Mr. Alvarez described a presence calm, watching, caring, not malicious. She logged the interaction, but didn't report it. Who would believe her? Still that night, as she walked past room 12, she couldn't help but glance toward the foot of the bed. There was nothing there, but the room felt full, like someone had just stepped out, or maybe like someone never left. The next morning, Jessica approached the charge nurse, casually asking who else had been assigned to room 12 the night before. The charge nurse glanced at the logbook and frowned. "No one," she said. "You were the only nurse assigned to that room during the entire shift." Jessica pressed. "No floaters, no assistants?" She shook her head. "Only you." Jessica nodded, pretending it was no big deal. But her heart pounded as she stepped away. She returned to the staff station and pulled up the digital shift records for the past 3 nights. Every entry matched what the charge nurse had said. Room 12 had only one assigned nurse. But Mr. Alvarez had described someone else, someone specific, and it wasn't just the patient. Another night nurse had once whispered something similar about feeling a hand on her shoulder when no one was around. Always in the West Wing, always gentle, always cold. A few nights later, Jessica was restocking supplies when Dr. Chen, one of the older physicians nearing retirement, stopped her in the hallway. He squinted as if trying to place her. "You're new here, right?" he asked. Jessica nodded. "Couple of weeks now?" He tilted his head, voice lowering. "Have we met before?" She smiled. "I don't think so." Dr. Chen hesitated, then said something that froze her mid-step. "5 years ago, I had a heart scare arrhythmia out of nowhere. Collapsed during rounds. They wheeled me into trauma. I remember blacking out. But before that, I saw a nurse leaning over me. Cold hands, calm eyes. She kept saying, 'You're not done yet. Stay with us.'" He paused. I never saw her again. They said no one matching that description was on shift. Said maybe I hallucinated, but she looked exactly like you. Jessica felt the air pull tight around her. "I wasn't even in med school 5 years ago," she managed to say. He gave a half smile, half frown. "I know how that sounds. I just remember her face. Yours." That night, Jessica sat alone in the break room, staring at her own reflection in the vending machine glass. Was it a mix-up? A coincidence? Or something stranger? Not that she had been the nurse from 5 years ago, but that she was somehow becoming her. Or worse, maybe she'd always been here. Just like the cold hands that never truly left. It happened just 3 nights later. The hospital was quiet, one of those unusually still shifts, where even the emergency room held its breath. Jessica was assigned to a light patient load and spent most of the evening walking the halls, double-checking charts, adjusting pillows, offering calm words. Staff said she had a gift for making patients feel safe, especially in the early hours when fear crept loudest. Around 3:30 a.m., she was last seen near room 9, speaking softly with a young boy awaiting a morning surgery. The charge nurse passed by, smiled at the scene, Jessica kneeling beside the bed, holding his hand, mouthing something gentle. And then, nothing. She didn't clock out. Didn't respond to overhead pages. Didn't answer her phone. Security was called. They pulled footage from the hallway outside room 9. At 3:42 a.m., the camera showed Jessica walking slowly down the corridor toward the West Wing alone. Her steps were calm, unhurried. She paused briefly beneath the emergency exit sign, then turned, looked straight into the lens. She smiled, not a big grin, just a knowing, quiet smile. And then she vanished. No fade, no blur. One frame she was there, next gone. Just gone. The footage has been viewed dozens of times since. No glitches, no static, just that impossible frame cut. Her badge was found later that morning, sitting neatly on the break room counter. Her locker untouched, nothing missing. But no one's seen her since, except for one patient. A week later, a woman recovering from cardiac surgery whispered to a nurse during rounds, "She was here again last night. Sat with me. Cold hands." "What did she look like?" the nurse asked. The patient closed her eyes, smiling faintly. Kind eyes, dark hair. Said her name was Jessica. The nurse hesitated, then quietly whispered back, "There's no Jessica on the schedule." But by then the woman was already asleep, resting peacefully. like she'd been watched over. They never found her. No sightings, no leads. Just a name that slowly faded from the schedule, a badge left behind, and stories whispered under breath during night shifts. But patients kept talking. In room 9, room 12, the West Wing, they all said the same thing. A gentle voice, a hand cool to the touch, a nurse who stayed long past the shift change. Some dismissed it as grief anesthesia dreams, wishful hallucinations. But the night nurses knew better. They stopped asking where Jessica went and started leaving the break room door slightly open, just in case. Because in hospitals, not every goodbye is final. Not every round ends with a clock out. And some nurses finish their rounds, even after death. Story 7, or Clara in the Walls. The night Clara disappeared, no one noticed at first. It was a chaotic shift, 3 traumas in under an hour, a code blue in maternity, and 2 nurses out sick. Everyone was running on caffeine and adrenaline. Clara, one of the floaters, had been assigned to the East Wing. Quiet rooms, mostly elderly patients, nothing unusual. She signed out linens at 10:47 p.m., checked vitals in room 22, and was last seen entering room 24 at 11:06. Then, nothing. Her pager went unanswered. Her rounds incomplete. They figured she ducked into the restroom, maybe took a call, maybe slipped into the wrong room by mistake. But the minutes stretched. By 12:15, the charge nurse was calling her name through every corridor. By 1,000, security was checking stairwells and closets. No one saw her leave. No one had heard a sound. But a patient near room 24 later whispered something strange. She was here, he said. I saw her. Where in the wall? Behind it. She was trying to scream. They dismissed it, of course. But the next night, another patient in the same hall pressed the call button and said, trembling, "There's someone crying in the walls." It was nearly a week after Clara's disappearance, when Nurse Erin, covering an overnight shift in the East Wing, experienced something she couldn't explain. She'd just finished checking on a restless patient in room 25 when she heard it, a soft knock, rhythmic like fingertips tapping hollow drywall. She paused, listened. Another knock, 3 slow taps, then silence. Curious and uneasy, she moved toward the source. It was coming from behind the supply cabinet bolted to the wall in the hallway. She leaned in, pressing her ear against the cool surface. That's when she heard it. A whisper, barely audible. "Help me." Erin stumbled back, heart pounding. She called out, but no reply came. Later that night, when she passed the hallway again, she saw her. Just for a second, a woman standing inside the wall, visible through a thin crack like mist on glass. Pale scrubs, hair pulled back, and eyes deep dark and impossibly sad. But it wasn't fear in those eyes. It was urgency, like she needed Erin to act. The figure raised her hand, fingers pressed flat against the invisible barrier. Then she vanished. Erin didn't sleep the next day. She spent hours flipping through old staff photos online trying to find that face. She found it in a newsletter from 2 months ago. Clara Jennings, float nurse, missing, presumed abducted. But Erin knew better. Clara wasn't gone. She was still here, and she wanted out. After that night, the dreams began. Erin didn't tell anyone who would believe her. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the same place, a narrow, dim corridor with crumbling brick walls, pipes hissing above her head, and a low fluorescent light that flickered like a dying pulse. She knew the place. It was the hospital's old sub-basement, sealed off decades ago after renovations. In the dream, she always started in the same spot, facing a rusted door with peeling yellow paint. A thick chain held it shut, but she could hear something behind it. Whimpering, scraping nails, and always Clara's voice. "Find me," it would say. "I'm still here." Sometimes Erin would get close, her dream self prying at the chained hands, bleeding heart racing. But before she could break through, she'd wake up, gasping, crying, cold sweat on her skin. By the third night, she couldn't ignore it. The dreams weren't random. They were memories or messages, and they were getting more vivid. She began sketching what she saw: the shape of the hallway, the placement of the door, the emergency panel beside it with the letters WB4. She took the sketches to the oldest maintenance guy on staff, a quiet man named Ray, who had worked in the building since before Erin was born. When he saw the drawing, his face went pale. "That door," he whispered. "That's real?" He looked around and lowered his voice. "But it doesn't lead to a storage room." He hesitated. "It leads to the walls." Erin couldn't ignore it anymore. The dreams, the sightings, the whispers in the hall, it all pointed to something buried deep in the hospital's bones. With Ray's reluctant help, she accessed old blueprints tucked away in a dusty archive room behind administration. It took hours, but they found it. A wing-labeled Service Passage WB4, long since marked as decommissioned. According to the notes, the corridor once connected the East Wing to the original boiler room, but a partial ceiling collapse 30 years ago had sealed it off. No repairs were ever completed. The hallway had been forgotten. Erin's hands trembled as she read further. There had been an incident. An inspection report from 1993 described a structural fault in the east wall of the old corridor. A patient transport team had gotten briefly trapped due to shifting supports, but the final line caught her breath. No casualties reported. Except that wasn't true. Taped behind the file was a yellowed incident memo, unsigned and half buried under years of dust. It mentioned a nurse unnamed who'd gone missing during the same night of the collapse. Erin flipped back to the map. That faulty wall, it connected directly to the hallway outside room 24, where Clara had vanished. Suddenly, everything made sense. Clara hadn't walked out. She hadn't been taken. She'd been swallowed by the building itself, trapped behind a failing wall, screaming where no one could hear. And for years, the hospital had paved over the truth. But Clara hadn't stopped trying. She knocked. She whispered. She reached out through thin places in the dark. And now Erin had found her trail. The only question left was, could she bring her back, or would she be pulled in too? Erin couldn't sleep. The truth felt too big, too buried, and yet too close. On her next off night, she returned to the archives alone, flashlight in hand, determined to dig deeper. She found a forgotten box labeled Construction Incidents, 1980s, 90s, wedged between rusted filing cabinets. Inside were brittle memos, photos, and debris assessments from old hospital renovations. One photograph stopped her cold. It showed 5 nurses standing together outside what looked like the East Wing's old hallway entrance, smiling, dust-streaked, hard hats and clipboards in hand. And Clara. No mistaking her this time, same eyes, same expression Erin had seen behind the wall. But this time, Clara wasn't just watching. She was holding a clipboard. Zoomed in, Erin could make out faint handwriting scrawled along the edge in faded pen. I failed to warn them once. Her stomach twisted. What did that mean? Was Clara not a victim of the wall, but a witness to something worse? Had she seen the danger and been ignored, or worse? Had she been silenced? The date on the photo was 6 months before the collapse. Clara had known. She'd tried to act. And when no one listened, she vanished into the very thing she tried to stop. Maybe her voice hadn't been heard then, but it was being heard now. Aaron understood. Clara wasn't just trapped. She was trying to finish what she started, to warn them again, before someone else disappeared. The wall behind room 24 was quietly sealed for good the following week. No press, no questions, just quiet patchwork and a change in the blueprints. But Aaron still walks that hall sometimes during night shifts, pausing near the scene where the cold air lingers just a little too long. She doesn't expect to see Clara anymore. She doesn't need to, because she finally understands Clara wasn't trapped in vengeance. She didn't haunt, she warned. Story 8. Jonah's Hour. They called it Jonah's Hour, but it always happened at the same time, 2:17 a.m. Never a minute earlier, never a minute later. It started as a joke among the night staff. Something to break the tension during long, yawning shifts. Watch out, they'd say, with a smirk, Jonah's hour is coming. But the smiles never quite reached their eyes, because everyone who'd worked more than a few weeks had seen something. Machines flatlining for no reason, only to spring back seconds later. Lights dimming, flickering, but only in the west corridor. Sudden cold like the hallway was breathing in. And always the feeling of being watched. But the weirdest part wasn't what happened. It was the timing. 2:17 a.m. every single time. The name came from a patient, Jonah Reyes, a quiet teenager admitted 6 years ago after a car crash, severe head trauma, never regained consciousness. He died at exactly 2:17 a.m. Flatline. Nothing strange, nothing dramatic. Except the moment he passed, every monitor on the floor spiked just for a second. Then silence. Since then, things changed, and it always circled back to that exact time. New nurses wrote it off. Veterans watched the clock. And no one liked being alone in the west hallway at 2:17. Because that's when he moved. When the hallway went silent. And Jonah walked again. The first person to actually see him was Marta, a traveling nurse, who'd picked up extra shifts over the holidays. She didn't believe in hospital ghost stories and laughed when the others warned her about Jonah's hour. Until her third night. She was doing rounds near the west hallway, checking vitals in room 39. Everything was quiet, too quiet. As she stepped into the hallway, her watch buzzed. 2:17 a.m. She turned the corner and stopped. A boy stood at the far end, thin, hospital gown, head slightly tilted. Marta's heart skipped. "Hey, buddy, you okay?" She called gently, thinking he was a sleepwalker. The boy didn't move. She took a step forward. He turned not all the way, just enough to reveal the blood-matted side of his head, and smiled. Marta blinked. He was gone. Back at the nurse's station, she told no one. Wrote it off as exhaustion, stress. But that morning, as she clocked out, she passed an old staff photo hanging near the elevators. Her breath caught. There he was. Same eyes, same tilt of the head. Jonah Reyes, dead 6 years, standing in her hallway just hours before. Marta didn't sleep after that shift. Couldn't. The image of the boy's smile haunted her, stitched behind her eyes like a second eyelid. She told herself it was stress sleep deprivation. But the next night at exactly 2:17 a.m., she returned to the west hallway. He was waiting. Same gown, same crooked tilt. But this time he moved. Slowly, Jonah turned and walked down the hall, not toward any room, but toward a section of wall between two emergency supply closets. Marta hesitated. Logic screamed at her to stop. But something deeper pulled her forward. As she approached, she realized something odd. His feet weren't quite touching the floor. They hovered just an inch above, gliding effortlessly. Then Jonah turned a corner that shouldn't exist. The hallway simply continued, stretched into a passage Marta had never seen before. The walls narrowed, the lights dimmed, and the sound of machines faded until only her breath remained. She followed. She passed rooms without numbers, each one dark, silent, filled with empty beds covered in dusty sheets. She whispered his name once. Jonah stopped, turned, and pointed at the door behind her. Room 217. A door that didn't belong on that floor. A door she'd never seen. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the knob. Behind her, Jonah whispered, "This is where I stayed," and vanished. Marta opened the door and stepped into a part of the hospital that no longer existed, a forgotten wing swallowed by time, where Jonah's hour never truly ended. The room beyond the door was ice cold, with the air dense like breathing through soaked cotton. Marta stepped in, heart thudding against her ribs' eyes, adjusting to the dark. It looked like an old patient room, decades out of use. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, and the bed at the center was rusted mattress slumped like a broken rib cage. But what struck her first wasn't what she saw. It was the smell. Rot. Like old flowers left too long in stagnant water. She moved slowly, the weak beam from her penlight sweeping the floor. In the far corner, she spotted a small nightstand. She opened its drawer. Inside, dust-covered Polaroids, dozens, all of the same child, Jonah, in the same gown, same room. In some he was smiling, in others eyes wide in terror. Marta flipped them one by one. On the back scrawled messages, "He comes at 2:17. Don't trust the light. I'm not alone." That last one chilled her. As she turned toward the door, she heard its footsteps. Not Jonah's. Heavy, wet, dragging. She backed away slowly, but the door slammed shut on its own. Locked. Something was coming. She looked around for an exit, then spotted a trapdoor beneath the bed frame. Desperate, she flung it open and climbed down into a narrow crawlspace lined with exposed pipe. That's when she saw it. Another child. Not Jonah. Smaller. Bones visible through skin. Shackled. He looked up at her lips, trembling. "He made me stay," the boy whispered. "He said if I screamed, he'd let the others go." Jonah. Marta's heart split between fear and horror. He wasn't haunting the hospital because he was lost. He was keeping something hidden. Or someone. He died at 2:17. But something else was born in that moment. Something Jonah was trying to contain. Or worse, protect. The hour wasn't his punishment. It was his penance. And the longer Marta stayed, the closer she came to becoming part of it. Marta barely had time to react. The boy in the crawl space backed into the shadows, whispering, "He's coming." The air shifted, thick, electric humming with something ancient and wrong. Then she saw it. From the far end of the narrow space, a figure began to emerge. Slow, deliberate, unnatural. Limbs too long, movement too fluid, like a marionette with invisible strings. At first, she couldn't make out a face, just darkness wrapped in skin. But as it stepped into the weak beam of her flashlight, her breath hitched. It was her. Same eyes, same face, same terrified expression, frozen in a grotesque, smiling mockery. She stumbled back, heart pounding. "No," she gasped. "That's not..." The thing tilted its head, perfectly mimicking her every movement. And then it spoke. "Jonah tried to keep me in it," whispered. "But someone always opens the door." The voice wasn't hers. It was dozens. Layered, screaming, begging. Jonah hadn't been trying to haunt the hospital. He'd been guarding it. And now the door was open. And the hour wasn't over. They found Marta hours later unconscious, near the abandoned corridor that shouldn't have existed. She was cold shaking, muttering the same thing over and over. Don't follow him. Don't follow him. She never worked another night shift. The hallway was sealed the next day. But still at 2:17 a.m. monitors flicker, lights dim. And some swear they see a boy standing watch. He wasn't lost. He was guarding the door. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't keep the fear to yourself. Leave a comment, smash that like button, and share this video with someone who dares to listen in the dark. We release terrifying true stories every week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. This is High Scare Stories, where nightmares don't end when the video does. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared.